A young man finds a mysterious hole. If he gets in, he'll be able to control the earth.
Malkovich.
Craig Schwartz is an unemployed puppeteer who dreams of making it big. While practicing puppet dances, he imagines receiving applause, but for now, he's stuck working in a workshop and remains unknown. His wife, Lotta, works at a pet store and loves animals, so their apartment is overflowing with them. Although they don't quite understand each other's passions, they tolerate these quirks out of love. In an effort to make some money, Craig performs a small street show. A little girl watches with interest, but Craig gets carried away and creates an overly romantic scene. Her father, thinking Craig is a creep, hits him. Realizing his wife was right, Craig starts looking for a job and finds an ad for a short employee with nimble fingers to handle paperwork. Fitting only one of the requirements, Craig heads to the office and discovers it's on the 7.5 floor. It's real, but the ceilings are so low that everyone has to walk hunched over. Before his interview, Craig meets the quirky secretary, Flores, and talks with the elderly Dr. Lester. He passes the easy tests and gets the job. He then watches a movie about the 7.5 floor and notices a stunning woman in the back. He tries to introduce himself, but it doesn't go well. The next morning at work, Craig has coffee with Maxine, and tries to talk about the film from the previous night, but she takes it as flirting. Despite being married, Craig finds Maxine willing to hook up but warns him that she's hard to please. Later, Craig returns to work and expertly handles the paperwork with his nimble fingers. Flores notices and compliments him, but he's not ready for her advances and mentions he's married. Dr. Lester, who has a crush on Flores, observes and feels jealous. Craig tries to calm his boss, but ends up hearing disturbing details about what it's like to be over 100 years old. Uncomfortable with these revelations, Craig reluctantly agrees to meet Lester for coffee after work, fearing for his job. At the end of the day, Craig calls his wife to let her know about the coffee with his boss. He then spots the beautiful woman whose name he still doesn't know. He challenges her to a bet. He'll have 3 tries to guess her name, and if he's successful, they'll go on a date. Maxine agrees, and Craig easily guesses her name by watching her reaction to his guesses. They agree to go on a date, and she invites him to a nearby bar at 7 p.m. Before heading to the bar, Craig has to have dinner with his boss and listen to his complaints about being an unwanted old man. Noticing it's almost 7, Craig hurriedly says goodbye to his boss, citing urgent matters, and rushes to the bar to meet Maxine. When Craig meets Maxine, he's visibly nervous and struggles to give a genuine compliment. At one point, Maxine starts to question his orientation, but Craig loudly insists that he loves women and wants to have an unforgettable night with her, even though he's married. Trying to get closer, Craig admits that he used to be a puppeteer and that it's his hobby, but the date ends abruptly. Back home, Craig lies to his wife, saying he only met with his boss. Lotta warns him that their monkey is afraid to sleep alone, so they'll all be sharing the bed tonight. Not wanting to sleep with an animal, Craig says he needs to stay at the workshop and spends the night there. As he continues playing with his puppets, imagining a perfect date with Maxine that ends with a romantic kiss, he loses himself in the fantasy. The next morning, Craig tries to talk to Maxine again, but she rejects him, saying she's not interested in a puppeteer. He professes his love, but she ignores his feelings and quickly leaves. Craig decides to distract himself by sorting documents in the archive. When he drops a folder behind a cabinet and goes to retrieve it, he discovers a small door. Driven by curiosity, he goes through the door and is suddenly pulled inside. When he comes to, he realizes he's inside the body of famous actor John Malkovich. 15 minutes later, Craig exits Malkovich's body and finds himself in a ditch near a bridge about a mile from his office. Shocked by the experience, he returns to the office and tells Maxine about it. She's skeptical and thinks he's lost his mind, so she heads home. Later that night, Maxine calls Craig with a business proposal. For $200, anyone can spend 15 minutes in John Malkovich's body. Despite the crazy idea, Craig agrees, still hoping to win Maxine over. Later, Craig and Lotta go for an evening walk, and Craig tells her about the strange experience. Lotta is intrigued and wants to try it herself. Not wanting to introduce his wife to Maxine, Craig suggests they head to the office immediately. He shows Lotta the special door, lets her enter Malkovich's body, and goes to the bridge to meet her when she returns. During her 15 minutes as Malkovich, Lotta enjoys watching him take a shower and is thrilled by the experience. She's eager to do it again, but Craig warns her not to get too carried away, as it might not be safe. That evening, Craig and Lotta go to dinner at Dr. Lester's place to try to improve their relationship with him and win his favor. At some point during the evening, Lotta heads to the bathroom but has trouble finding the right door. She ends up in a room that turns out to be a museum dedicated to John Malkovich, filled with his photos and personal memorabilia. Lotta is a bit unnerved but can't stop thinking about the actor and the idea of being in his body. The next morning, Lotta visits Craig's office and meets Maxine. She confides that she has realized she has an unconventional orientation and is now considering transitioning to become a man. This revelation shocks Craig, who is not ready for such a drastic change. Overhearing their conversation and argument, Maxine offers to let Lotta experience being in Malkovich's body again. While Craig takes Lotta to the special door, Maxine manages to get Malkovich's phone number and plans to call him while Lotta is in his head. Once she has the number, Maxine calls Malkovich and flirts with him, suggesting a meet-up, knowing that Lotta can hear everything. Although Malkovich initially turns down the fan's offer, Lotta's voice in his head piques his interest and makes him reconsider. Knowing that Malkovich and Maxine's date is set for 8 p.m., Lotta decides to return to Malkovich's body to watch them from his perspective. Immersed in the experience, Lotta enjoys being a man and finds pleasure in interacting with Maxine. After the date, Lotta lies to Craig about her experience, saying nothing notable happened. She also realizes she's fallen for Maxine and wants to be with her, so she suggests inviting Maxine over for dinner. A few days later, Craig and Maxine have their first customer. A heavy-set, insecure man who dreams of being a successful actor. He eagerly pays for the chance to spend 15 minutes as John Malkovich. That evening, Maxine visits Craig and Lotta, and both Craig and Lotta try to seduce her. They each attempt to kiss her, but Maxine skillfully avoids their advances. She admits she's not interested in Craig but finds Lotta appealing, though only as Malkovich. A few days later, Lotta realizes she can't live without Maxine and agrees to another plan. While Craig sleeps alone, Lotta arranges to be inside Malkovich's head during Maxine's visit. After selling tickets for the chance to be in the actor's body, Maxine meets Malkovich in person. Lotta, knowing exactly when she'll be inside, watches as Maxine and Malkovich get intimate. Lotta not only observes but actively participates in the experience, leading to mutual enjoyment. Malkovich is slightly taken aback when Maxine calls him by a different name, but he's willing to overlook it for a night with such a stunning woman. When Lotta gets home, Craig finds out that she was in Malkovich's body and had sex with Maxine. This revelation sparks a huge argument, but Lotta isn't remorseful. She's in love with Maxine and wants to be with her, no matter the cost. Feeling double-crossed by both women, Craig sinks into a deep depression and can't focus at work. He tries to talk to Maxine about everything, but she dismisses him, admitting she only likes Lotta when she's in Malkovich's body. Craig, consumed by anger, returns home and hides under the table. When Lotta arrives, he emerges with a revolver and demands that she set up another date for Maxine with Malkovich. As Lotta becomes his hostage, she reluctantly agrees and arranges the meeting. Craig then ties her up and locks her in a cage with a chimpanzee. Meanwhile, Maxine heads to the theater to invite Malkovich on a date. Their encounter ends on the couch, and Craig not only watches them make love with satisfaction but also becomes the voice in Malkovich's head, guiding his every move. Malkovich, unwittingly following Craig's instructions, becomes increasingly terrified. After leaving Malkovich's head, Craig returns home and excitedly tells Lotta how he managed to control the actor. He feels like a puppet master, making Malkovich do whatever he wants. Lotta, however, remains indifferent, locked in the cage and finding solace only in the company of the chimpanzee. Meanwhile, Malkovich meets with his friend Charlie Sheen, sharing the strange events and seeking advice. Charlie suggests that it might be infatuation causing Malkovich to act so irrationally. Realizing there's more to the situation, Malkovich decides to follow Maxine. Late at night, he trails her to the office on the 7th floor. There, he discovers a bizarre line of people waiting outside Maxine's office. When he learns that people are paying to enter his head, Malkovich creates a scene, trying to figure out how it all works. Craig offers him a free trial through the tiny door leading to his brain, and Malkovich, intrigued, goes inside. He finds himself in a surreal space filled with countless versions of himself, all repeating his last name. Shocked, he tries to escape but ends up in a ditch near a bridge when his 15 minutes are up. He vows to stop these sessions and threatens to sue Craig if it happens again. Back at home, Craig continues to argue with Lotta and refuses to let her out of the cage. During their fight, he realizes that Lotta is right. Maxine will never be interested in him because he doesn't excite her. Misinterpreting this, Craig forces Lotta to call Maxine and arrange another date. Leaving Lotta in the cage with the chimpanzee, Craig rushes to the office to get into Malkovich's head again. Meanwhile, the chimpanzee remembers being captured by poachers and knows she needs to untie the ropes to escape. She helps Lotta free herself, who then calls Maxine and explains everything. Surprisingly, Maxine isn't scared. She's more interested in the thrill of knowing someone else is in Malkovich's head, regardless of who it is. When Maxine meets Craig, she knows he's not just in Malkovich's head but has fully taken over his body like a puppet. Thrilled by the situation, she suggests they make love on the dining table. Although Malkovich tries to resist, Craig, in control, enjoys the moment with Maxine. To flaunt his power, Craig puts on some music and makes Malkovich perform a tragic puppet dance. Maxine, delighted, proposes that they stay in Malkovich's body permanently, given his wealth. The next morning, Craig, now Malkovich, introduces Maxine as his fiancée and tells his agent to end his acting career, as he's now going to be a famous puppeteer. Desperate, Lotta seeks out Dr. Lester and reveals her obsession with getting back into Malkovich's body. Dr. Lester admits he's not who he seems. He discovered the small door 90 years ago and learned to not only enter people's minds but also to fully control them. This has allowed him to jump from one body to another, living forever. When someone turns 44, you can enter their mind and stay there permanently, if it's done before midnight. Otherwise, the traveler gets trapped in a child's mind. Dr. Lester introduces Lotta to a group of elderly people who want to transfer into Malkovich's body. Lotta reveals that Craig is currently controlling Malkovich. 8 months later, Craig, now in Malkovich's body, and Maxine are expecting a baby. Malkovich, now a famous puppeteer, has transformed from a successful actor into a world-renowned figure. Watching a news story about them, Lotta fights back tears, longing to be with Maxine and envying Craig. Before Malkovich's 44th birthday celebration, Craig goes to the theater for a performance featuring his puppet in a life-sized human form. When Craig returns home, he discovers that his pregnant wife has been kidnapped. Dr. Lester calls, threatening to kill Maxine unless Craig leaves Malkovich's body. Feeling like a failure with no job, no wife, and no future, Craig is terrified to make the change. Realizing they can't take over Malkovich's body, Lotta decides to shoot Maxine to keep her from falling into anyone else's hands. To save herself and her child, Maxine escapes through the door into Malkovich's mind. In the chaotic mix of Malkovich's memories, Maxine tries to evade Lotta. When they're pulled back to reality, Maxine calms Lotta and reveals she's pregnant with her child. Since Maxine was in Malkovich's body at the time of conception, the baby is technically theirs. Meanwhile, Craig gets wasted and starts a bar fight. Realizing that Maxine is the most important thing in his life, he calls Dr. Lester and agrees to his terms. With just minutes before midnight, Craig exits Malkovich's body and goes back to being a down-and-out puppeteer. Knowing that Malkovich's body is now available, the elderly people rush through the small door to permanently take over his body and extend their lives. Craig spots Maxine and Lotta but is ignored when he tries to talk to them. They catch a cab and leave him stranded in the rain. 7 years later, Malkovich, now inhabited by Lester and the other old people, is married to Flores. He meets with a friend and reveals the secret of their immortality, suggesting they continue their body-swapping escapades. Their new target? The 7-year-old daughter of Lotta and Maxine. Meanwhile, Lotta and Maxine are happily raising their daughter, completely unaware that Craig is trapped inside her mind, forced to watch their lives unfold while being unable to speak or act. If you had the unique opportunity to be in someone else's body, who would you choose? Perhaps an actor, a famous athlete, or a politician? Share your choice in the comments below and pick the most interesting one.